Hey, welcome back to Complete Wavelab 9. Now in this section, I want to show you how to incorporate plugins to your Wavelab project. And this is a little bit different than what you may be used to because, as we've said in previous chapters, Wavelab is a very different animal than a traditional DAW. And two of the biggest differences are there's nothing even remotely similar to a channel strip, nor is there any sort of a mixer utility in the traditional sense of the word. So as compared to DAWs like Cubase or Sonar, etc., there's not an obvious place to go to start working with your effects. So you look at the user interface, and it's not immediately obvious where to even begin. Now there are 3.5 ways to add plugins in Wavelab here, and you'll see what I mean by that in a second. The first and probably most popular is over here to the right-hand side in the Master section. There is an Effects tab, and if it's folded like this, you simply click it to open it. And you'll notice that the Master Rig is inserted automatically by default. Now, Master Rig is new in version 9 and is extremely cool. We're going to do a whole video just on Master Rig. The fact that it's sitting there it is to help you, I think, find it and get to use it, but it's sitting there empty. So the fact that it's inserted isn't going to color your audio or throw anything off at all. And we'll come back to this creature in a subsequent video. If you want to add more effects, simply click on an empty slot. You can use the plus icon down here to add additional slots. And when you do, this selection menu is going to open, and you can then choose your family and class of plugins. So the Sonnex restoration plugins, for example, all of the Steinberg stuff, and then third-party options as well. And just for the sake of demonstration, let's jump in here and throw a Steinberg EQ on. As soon as you select it, it's going to bring the graphic user interface up, and you can make your adjustments, load your presets, what have you. Now, the first thing everybody wants to know then is, okay, now how do I get rid of it? There's no obvious delete button, and there's a couple of different ways. You can click on this, the rectangular icon in the corner with the two stubs coming out of it, which I think is meant to represent a signal with a box. That's your plugin menu. And if you open that and simply select Remove Plugin, that'll do it. The other option is to right-click on the slot itself. It's going to open up essentially that same menu again, and the first option there is to remove the plugin. Now, the stuff that you're putting there, the entire project is going to be processed through that. And I should also point out, we're working in the audio montage view at the moment, and that's really the only place that you can apply plugins. They don't have specific effects handling tools really in the audio file window, because that's for waveform editing. And the theory is, I think, that you would do your audio editing there, then bring it into the montage before you would want to add effects to it and so forth. But so we're in the audio montage view. Now, the second level you can work on, if that was the whole project, the second level would be the track level. Over to the left-hand side, you can see the track numbers, and above that, above this track 1, you see 0FX. If you click on that rectangle, it's going to open the Add Effect dialog, and now we can call up the same selection menu, and we could take something like, again, one of our filtering tools, or, you know what, a more real-world example would be, this is probably someplace where you might want to add an effect like the Sonnex restoration, assuming that every song in that track was maybe off the same old scratchy recording, and you wanted to come in and do the denoise or what have you. Now, the Sonnex plugins are very cool too, and they each get their own chapter, and that's coming up elsewhere. But this is going to apply, doing it this way is going to apply that plugin across the entire track. And then if you open this back up, you can see, in addition to the Add Effect option, I can see the two effects that I've put in there, the filter and the denoiser. So if I said, I really don't want that dual filter, simply call it up, plugin menu, and remove plugin. And now you see there's only one effect. You click on it, and that's the denoiser. So the second question then is, how do you, if I want to adjust that, you've already seen, you simply select it from that menu, and the user interface pops up. And the same thing over here. You click on the name, and it pops up. Now, the third level, so that was project level, track level. Let's talk clip level. And I want to call your attention to the tabs in the upper left-hand corner here. And assuming that you've got the standard factory layout applied, the Effects tab is going to give you a lot of tools to kind of tunnel down on this stuff. And you can see that in the center of the Effects tab, you've got 3 level selection tools. You can look at the clip level, track level, or output. And if you add an effect to the montage output, that is something that's going to be applied before the signal rolls into the master section. And we'll come back to that. But let's look at the clip level. I've got at the moment the clip Phoenix selected here. And if I hover the mouse at the bottom center near the name, you're going to see the this dialog pop up that reiterates the name of the clip. And at the moment it says there's no effect applied. If you simply click there, again, you get the Add Effects dialog, and you can go in, same interface. And let's, just for the sake of argument, let's throw a reverb on this one. Something simple here. And now we've got the reverb unit applied just to that clip. And in the next video, we're going to look at how to get in and mess with that a little better with regards to send levels and stuff. So there's your clip level processing, your track level processing, your project level processing. Now that's 3. I told you there were 3.5 ways to apply plugins. The half is down here below the master output control, where it says Final Effects Dithering. And the significance of this area is that it is post-fader. This is the very last stop before the signal leaves the software. And of course, with dithering, the 2 rules of thumb with dithering is you only want to do it once and you want to make it the last step in the process. So if I open the effects interface there and I look at the Steinberg menu, the only effect it's going to offer me is the mastering plugin, the UV22. So it is technically still an effect slot, but it's highly limited because it's limited to just the dithering stuff. So that's the 3.5 ways in which you can apply effects. Now, before we leave this topic, there's one other very important aspect to this, and that's this equal sign that you see to the left of the plugin name over the master section. And anytime you see this equal sign in WaveLab 9, it's going to take you to a channel processing dialog. And what this means is that you can select which of your various stereo or mid-side channels you want to apply that plugin to. Now, in the case of the master rig here, you can see that's being applied across the entire stereo field, which would be the appropriate way to use that plugin. But this is probably one of the most powerful aspects to WaveLab 9. Let's throw in that. I will just throw in that EQ again for the sake of argument, the GEQ 10. And now, if I drop down that channel processing dialog, even though the GEQ 10 is not by itself a mid-side processor of any kind, it's just a basic EQ, I do have the option to apply it only to the middle of the stereo field or to simply the sides of the stereo field. And of course, you can also do independent left-right processing here. But if for example, you wanted to tone down some aspect of the instruments that were panned in the center, you could apply this EQ just to the center, and you see that the icon now changes from that equal sign to an M. And of course, as you would expect, if I change it to an S, you're going to see that and so forth. So any plugin that you own, regardless of manufacturer, when you loaded it, by using it through WaveLab 9, it becomes a mid-side capable effect, because I guess the effect doesn't change, but WaveLab 9 allows you to apply that effect just to the mids or just to the sides as you see fit. And that in and of itself is an incredible aspect. This program just turned every plugin in your library into a mid-side compatible plugin, which is extremely cool. And we're going to pick up, sort of take the next step from the previous one on how to add effects and look at how to control both the effects and some other aspects of WaveLab using the same tool set. And really what we're talking about here is what you would call automation in a typical DAW environment. But once again, the way that WaveLab looks at the world is just a little bit different than a traditional DAW. And again, that's down to the fact we have no channel strip, we have no mixer, and we're not really looking linearly along each individual track. We're looking at the project as a whole. So what we don't have is a fader with a read-write button and so forth. Instead, what we have is sort of a bird's eye view of each individual clip here. And let's go back to first principles. When we were looking at how to manipulate audio in a couple chapters back, we discovered that if you hover the mouse over the heavy black line in the middle, you'll have the ability to turn the volume down or up across the entire clip by moving it. And if you come to the end, you get a left-right horizontal arrow that is your fade tool. That's all true, but there's actually more going on here. When we're doing this and adjusting the volume, what we're really doing is what you would call volume automation in any other circumstance. To make that a little more clear, I'm going to double click on this line and add a few more control nodes, and that's going to allow me to make adjustments over time. And to really get a hold of this concept, let's go to the ribbon and come over about half a dozen tabs to envelope. And what you're going to see is a lot of tools for fine-tuning what we just did there. Now, in this particular case, the option for smoothing is turned on, which has turned what would otherwise be immediate changes into softer Bezier curves. And that's really just down to what kind of effect you're trying to achieve and, how abrupt you want the change to be. So in this case, what you would be seeing is, if you're familiar with Cubase and you're thinking of looking at an automation lane over time, you would have essentially the same sort of a curve there where the sound is going to be lowered in the beginning in this particular example and then higher at the end. And the way you're going to achieve that is through using the envelope. Now, check this out. If we go to the far left-hand side, there's a drop-down menu that lets us access many different envelope types. So if we open that up, we were just working with volume and fade. Let's come down and select pan. And now you notice that our heavy black line in the center of that clip is returned to neutral. And if I click and drag vertically now, instead of changing the volume, it's actually affecting the pan, which does change the volume, but just on one side of the stereo field. And here again, we can click and add additional points. And then we can move those either as abrupt curves. So if you wanted sort of an auto pan thing going on, you would do it something like this. So I'll move that blinking cursor for you. Or you could modulate your smoothing options to do that in a little nicer way. And if you want to get rid of those nodes, you simply double click them and they disappear. And as far as pan goes too, you'll notice there's a second drop-down that's appeared. So if we go back to our normal sort of single line here, moving stuff left to right, let me put a really severe pan on this. And here we go. We'll pan it hard right here. And I'm going to show you a couple of different options. And I want you to keep your eye on the relative size of those two waveforms. And in this view, size correlates to volume. And if you open the secondary drop-down menu, you'll see there are 4 options for pan law. And of course, one of the coolest things about Wavelab is if you hover over something, not only does it tell you what it is, there's a blue tell me more. And if you pop that open, it's going to give you a real good rundown of your 4 different pan modes. And this second one, constant power, is probably what you're most used to. And I know this is slightly off topic because we're talking about pan law instead of envelopes here, or automation. But this second option, the pan law here, if we change that, you notice how if I move from channel dump to constant power, the size of those waveforms changes. And what's going on here in the in sort of if you go way back, the first generation of panning, if you're taking a signal that was going through 2 speakers and you pan it hard left or hard right, the amount of signal is dropping by 50%. So the overall volume of that track becomes less. If you apply constant power, the system automatically compensates so that even though you put the electric guitar hard left, the electric guitar's overall volume in the mix stays the same. So it applies a subtle 3 decibel boost as you go to full scale left or right. In channel dump, no automatic gain correction is applied. So the further off center you pan something, the weaker it becomes overall. And then you have 2 other options, which is channel boost 4 and channel boost 6. And in this, it's actually increasing the size of the waveform, or the volume of the waveform, in the direction that it was panned by 4.5 or 6 decibels. And this is more or less a technique or a matter of taste and choice. I would say in the absence of any other guidance or any other compelling need to do something differently, stick with the constant power, only because the way that panning works is going to emulate what you're probably used to in a DAW or any contemporary digital mixer. And the whole world has kind of gone to a constant power mindset so that you're not, you pan something, you don't have to make a volume correction to keep it in the same place in the mix. But that's what this secondary menu that comes up around pan is all about. So we'll set that to constant power. And then relative to our last chapter on the effects in particular, let's drop this main drop down again, and let's refocus our envelope this time on the effect RoomWorks SE. And if you recall in our previous chapter, we applied a clip level effect, a reverb effect here to Phoenix. And now as I'm manipulating this vertical line up and down, we're going from a full wet to a full dry mix. This is essentially controlling what you would normally think of as your send level. And here again, we have the option to double click, create more nodes. And I mean, you see how it works now. You get the basic idea. So if we wanted the reverb to start at 0 and then gradually increase over the length of the clip and maybe a crescendo here, this is how you would do it. So as you're looking at that curve from left to right across the length of the clip, what you're really seeing with the drop-down menu here set to effect, you're seeing the wet-dry balance move to a progressively wetter mix as the clip extends. You can go back and see that pan effect that we were just talking about. And again, more nodes, more control. And then finally back to volume. And if you have everything where you want it and you're trying to clean up your display, your last option up here is to simply hide all. And the other tools here, like your zoom tools and so on, are going to give you better views, more control, more granularity, and then the option to take an envelope curve and copy it from one piece of audio and paste it to another and so forth. But the basic process remains the same. And like everything else here, once you have something set the way you want it, you can save it as a preset, and that makes it easier to call up if you find yourself doing similar types of work day after day or week after week. It just makes it a little easier to not have to repeat all of those node placement and adjustment steps each time. So I guess one other thing I would point out, the only place that I've been able to find in all of WaveLab where the word automation actually pops up is right here under this under the routing tab in the clip level effect, where if you set something to the blend wet dry, it does give you the option to call up the automation envelope. Historically, this has just been the envelope, and as far as I know, that's the only place they ever use automation. And all that's going to do, let's move this ribbon back to the View tab. If you select that automation envelope, it's just going to shift you to the envelope tab down here to get at the stuff that we were just looking at. So that's the basics of how to deal with the concept of automation or to manipulate things over time in the audio montage for WaveLab. And we'll wrap that up here and move on to the next chapter.